proud Penn State grad out here in California. I'm really bummed out that the number 7 Penn State Nittany Lions won't be playing football this year. Really bummed out about it. I was at the last Rose Bowl when they came out with my kids, and it was a great time. So I really miss Happy Valley. I actually for my senior year, I went to State College Area High School. So I was a townie for 1 year, and I spent most of my high school and junior high in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I consider myself a Philadelphian and an Eagles and Phillies and Flyers fan. So I'm from your area. I want to give you a little bit of background on me because everyone has their own little history, and mine's a little different. My dad and mom were born in Korea, and they decided when we were little, when I was about 4 or 5, that he was called to be a missionary doctor. He was a doctor in Korea, and they moved us to what back then what we called the West Bank. And so I lived in the town of Bethlehem, not Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem in the Middle East. And I was there for about 6 years. My father was the one delivering babies in the Bedouin tents, fixing broken legs, and had their only hospital out there. And so mostly serving a lot of the Arabs and Palestinians in that area. So I grew up there speaking English, a little bit of Korean, which I lost very quickly, and then a little bit of Arabic and a little bit of Hebrew. And I lived in the predominantly Arab section in Bethlehem, and then every day I would drive to school in Jerusalem, which was not very far, to the international school, and so learned a little bit of everything. And so that was my background growing up. I didn't know any different. I thought that was normal. And so and after that, and back in 1981, my father got sick, and we moved to the United States, where our missions board was based in Philadelphia. And then I went to school there all the way through in the Philadelphia area. I went to Cheltenham High School up to the 11th grade, and then my father moved to become a pastor, left being a physician to be a pastor with the State College Korean Church in State College. And I went there for my senior, as I said, at State College Area High School, and then went to Penn State. And it was great. I lived in the dorms, absolutely refused to live at home. I lived in the dorms in East Halls, and crossed that parking lot when it was just snowing like crazy. I remember that to this day. Walking across to go to school in January, my classes in January and February. So a lot of fond memories, a lot of Penn State football, a lot of hanging out at the Creamery and in College Ave. So that's my background. After I graduated, I was luckily, so going back a little bit, my senior year of high school, of college, I was studying liberal arts. Having grown up overseas, and a lot of my friends in my earlier years when I was in Israel, their parents worked for the United Nations. So I grew up with this love for history and international relations and political science, and my father thought I was going to go to law school. He's like, this guy's going to law school. He can't do a lick of math. And so I was a high verbal, very low math guy growing up, and so this guy's going to law school. No other way. But strangely enough, through a friend of mine, I did an internship at MBNA at that point at Penn State, and had a telemarketing center selling credit cards when that was very hot back in the 90s, and I needed a part-time job my senior year. So I worked there for a year in telemarketing, and learned to sell, and then doing a lot of quality control. And they had a program called the Management Development Program, and basically it was 20 people a year they would pick to go through this rotational program around the bank at that time. Everything from marketing, finance, collections, customer service, just to know how, just to bring someone up to speed in terms of how a bank runs. And so I was able to get in that program. I interviewed. I didn't know a lick about business. I think the only business class I took was an econ class, which I think I got a C, because I said just too much math. Didn't work for me. So I really enjoyed, however, my poli-sci history. I learned to write. I was not a very disciplined writer or a speaker when I came out of high school. I just did a blah, 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 blah. But they taught me how to sort of be very structured in the way that I write. Here's your thoughts. Here are your supporting, your supporting thoughts, and then sort of a conclusion, how to speak, standing up, defending your viewpoint. And all of that stuff was very helpful for me. And in the beginning, when I was like, oh, this is useless. It's never going to help me out in the real life when I need a job. And now, 30 years some later, I'm looking at it saying, oh my gosh, that was extremely helpful in terms of being able to sort of structure my thoughts. How am I going to talk about it? How to write this email? All of that comes into play. And that was very useful in terms of how I think about it. But I didn't really appreciate that until much later in my career. When I first started my job, I'm like, I wish I was a finance, accounting major, marketing, but all that stuff is learned. You can learn that stuff. But I think the biggest thing I learned going all the way through this is the idea of learning how to communicate through writing, through speaking, defending your viewpoints, learning how to deal with people, taking abstract ideas and putting them into action. And those are the things that I learned in my liberal arts education. So just to go back now, pull you back. I'm graduating from college. I'm thinking I'm going to law school or going to the State Department or something, right? And I get this opportunity because of my part-time job to interview for the Management Development Program, because one of the folks that were working in that center was doing his internship there, and he was going to get, and he was actually in the Management Development Program, and he said, Tim, you should think about this program. And I was like, oh, I had no idea. In fact, I had no idea even what the heck business is. I had no idea about getting a job. And so there was sort of a baptism by fire real quick. And they pulled me over because I did very well in my job selling credit cards. So your parents probably got a call from me. Hi, this is Tim calling from the Penn State Alumni Association. Would you be interested in the credit card? So that was my job, and I did very well at that. And so they interviewed me, and I was accepted into the program. And throughout that program, I had a really, really hard time, to be honest with you. I had no sense. I never took a marketing class. I took no business classes. It was sort of a sink or swim, and you're among very 20 sort of type A's that are sort of, fighting for attention, to get in front of people, to make their point, and to stand out within that group. Because after you graduate from 12 months of this group, this management development program, they put your picture up there in front of the executive committee, and they do an NFL draft. Like, who wants this guy? So everyone's trying to stand out, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God. Like, I know nothing about this marketing stuff. And so I ended up at night just buying marketing books and finance books and literally reading at night, figuring out what the heck are they talking about in these meetings. I have no idea. And so I ended up learning a lot about that on my own time, and then working sort of 70-hour weeks. So I was very committed to figuring out how this all works. And one thing I realized from all that is none of this is rocket science, right? Business is not rocket science. It's figuring out what people want and providing a way how I can provide that, right? And then learning all of the secret handshakes, which is the language, and figuring out what that means, and then going out there and making your point. And that's kind of what I learned from all of this. And so I graduated. So real quick, I graduated from this program in 12 months. They put my picture up, and I don't know whether it was some kind of like profiling or something. They put me in finance, and I'm sitting there going, I don't think you guys realize I'm not good at numbers. Maybe it was because I'm an Asian guy. They think I'm good at math or something, because they put me in finance, and I'm sitting there modeling out. They want me to model out in mergers and acquisitions, right? Sort of figuring out what this asset is valued at and how do we buy it. And so I'm sitting there and saying, okay, so I don't know what valuation is. I have no idea what a merger and acquisition is. So I better figure this out real quick. So they hand me a book by McKinsey, the consulting firm, called Valuation. And I'm reading that thing at night, and it's this dense, thick thing about numbers and how you value a company and an asset. And then daytime, they're like put me in front of Microsoft Excel, which I've almost never used. So I basically know how to, I know how to data input. So I'm figuring out about this stuff during the daytime and nighttime. I'm figuring out how to use Excel, learning what finance is, and then literally during the daytime, valuing assets. So it was, I tell you what, to be honest with you, I don't know what I was doing. But I was committed to learning, right? I was committed to learning. So I figured that out. And after a year of that, they moved me out to a different group called Asset Liability Management. And talk about numbers. This is the group that does interest rate derivatives. If you know what derivatives are, it is straight math. And they're going to figure out from that perspective. My job as the low man on the totem pole was run these massive Excel models. Basically told us what the risk, interest rate risk is. So we lend out at 8% and we're borrowing at 5%. So we have all of these loan products that do all of these different rates, and then how we're funded, and then the derivatives that match this risk. And then are we negatively or positively gapped? Meaning, if interest rates go up, are we get hurt by it? Or are we helped by it? So I'm sitting there going, oh my God, how did I get myself into this? So I literally had to learn this again. I said, please send me to classes. So they sent me to classes in New York of how to learn this. So my bosses were actually very, very helpful. As long as you're willing to ask and say, I have no freaking clue about this stuff, but I want to learn. And as long as they saw that you want to get the job done, you want to learn, at these companies, they're willing to help you. And so the first thing I did was I literally came in and said, I know I was an M&A, but I'll be honest with you. I never took a single finance class. So there's hope for you guys in liberal arts. As long as you're honest and say, listen, I need some help and I'm willing to learn, right? And I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to work at night to figure out how this works. And I think that attitude to today, when I'm in the head of finance and in terms of as head of HR, what I look for is someone who's committed and someone who's willing to learn and someone's willing to be committed to something. And I feel like that these are the guys and gals that are willing, basically have the attitude that whatever it takes. And I look for that, right? Whether you're an engineer, whether you're in finance, whether you're in marketing, I look for that specific thing of this person is committed and they care. Right? And ultimately, I look for that because that's what I think I provided. And that's what these companies were willing to invest in me, was for that reason, was that I cared. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't just a job that I did. You tell me to do this and this and I do it and I'm done. I go home for the day. Right? No, I own it. And if it doesn't get done, it's on me. And I felt that sense of ownership. And to today, that is the number one thing I look for. Besides the must-have technical skills, that's the number one thing I look for. Is this person committed to owning something and that it's theirs. So I did that. Then I sort of progressed in my career through finance. I learned a lot. Went to business school at Chicago, which is a quant school. So I don't know how I ended up doing this, but then, you basically learn that, and what you learn about all of these things is there's a secret handshake to most of this stuff, right? It's the language that they use to confuse people outside the club. Right? And as long as you are able to ask questions and saying, I understand it's a very complicated thing, but break it down for me into little pieces and tell me what you mean by that. Most people can learn this. Most people can learn this stuff. And so I ended up I stayed up in the M&A way. And then what this tells you is what your first job is, what you'll learn, kind of carries you through, right? And you can switch in and out of things, but it's very hard to switch once you're on that track. But it can be done. And so I had a lot of different experiences in moving up the chain of command in finance. And I thought, listen, someday I'm going to be a CFO, I'm going to be a CEO, but I'm going to go up the finance track. And the one thing I learned as you go up in finance is it ain't about the numbers. It's about ideas, about selling your ideas, right? And having a viewpoint and being able to defend it and understand it and sell it. Because at the end of the day, when I got to a very senior level in strategy and M&A, you're like, oh, this must be all about how do you value a company, what are the numbers, the CEO with, no. CEO knows and says, here's the reason I want to do this deal. I need you to go in front of the board and show me that in terms of numbers. Use numbers, but sell that idea for me as my senior M&A guy. So again, if you think it's about the numbers, that's a very junior role, right? But as you move up, it's all about take those ideas and what do those numbers mean? What are the concepts around it? What's the strategy behind it? And go sell it. And that ultimately is how you become a senior person. So let me take a step back now. And I know I'm kind of all over the place, but I want to get a couple of very important ideas through. If you want to be an investment banker, a lot of those guys start as liberal arts majors. In fact, they like art majors. They like those type of folks who can think on their feet, who then learn, right? Who are high achievers, who then learn about numbers and who are analytical. So you can be analytical and not be a numbers person. Be analytical. And I think that's what I kind of bring is I'm analytical and do it. And then at the end of the day, you work your way up this track. So you start off as an analyst and you do a bunch of modeling and numbers and you learn how a company works in terms of the numbers. Then as you move up to vice president, you move up to managing director, your job is to sell, right? The reason they get paid millions of dollars as either a private equity fund or an investment bank, is those guys in the front, they convince people to work with them. Whether I'm selling my services or please let me buy your company. And that's a sales job. So at that point, you don't do much numbers at all. You know how to do it because it's in your mind as a junior guy, you did it, but you're taking ideas, structuring them, putting it on a presentation, and selling it. And that's how you move up the chain. Whether you're a CFO, whether you're an investment banker, whether you're a private equity, that's really what you do, right? Or even as a head of engineering, right? My head of engineer isn't there to actually sit there and do engineering. His job is to have an idea of how this group should work, who's in the right place, and how we're going to take and communicate this up to the CEO of this is what we're doing. If you sit up there as a head of engineering and all you can do is tell me about the engineering aspect of it, you're not going to be in that job very long. I want you to tell me the business and strategy of engineering. What are you trying to do and how are you going to make it better, and communicate to me how that aligns with my business. And who learns this early on? Liberal arts students. They learn to take an idea, structure it into a logical framework, and to communicate it, right? So understand that when you do these presentations, when you do these papers, don't just do it. Think about it from I'm selling an idea. This is my viewpoint. Here are the points that back it up. And this is why you should believe my idea, right? Because that is, no matter where you are, that's how you succeed. So going back to my history, so I go back and I go through this finance track. 2008 rolls around, right? I'm head of M&A for a very large British insurance asset management company. I'm sitting in Chicago. We're trying to, and the financial crisis comes in. And the U.S. gets hit first. I'm using Lehman Brothers, of all people, right, as my banker. And they're going out of business while I'm using them. And we're trying to buy Sun America. We're trying to buy Hartford Insurance Company. I'm out there trying to do deals, right? And then the financial crisis hits the UK. And my company basically says, we own a bunch of different insurance companies and asset managers in the US. You got to get rid of like 3,000 people. And I sit there and said, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm not going to go do that. So I actually ended up quitting my job. And my wife said, and this is, and I thank my wife for this. She says, Tim, you look miserable. One day before I quit, you look miserable. And I explained to her why. I really don't want to do this. And this is in the middle of the financial crisis. She says, you know what, then quit your job. Why don't you go find something you really enjoy doing? I think she still regrets it a little bit to this day. Because then we started going like this. So I go back and said, I would like to move back to San Francisco where I worked in finance earlier in my career and where my wife is from. And so I said, let's move back to the Bay Area. And what I started to do at that point was actually very risky, and I wouldn't recommend it to most people. I started to invest in early stage companies with my own money. And then going in there basically saying, not only do I want to invest in you guys, I want to then go and help you make your company better. Because a lot of these early stage companies back in, when you start the companies, a bunch of engineers, a few junior engineers, or a few guys that have never really started a company. And then they basically need somebody with business experience to come in and help them sort of take it the right direction and what we call scaling. So that's kind of what I did. And I've been very successful at it. I invested in a company called Flight Guru. We sold online business and first class tickets back in 2010, using miles and points as the currency, not cash, to go buy. And there was this arbitrage, what we call it, which means I could buy it really cheap using miles and points and then selling it for cash on the internet. And so we took that company from like 5 million to about 80 million revenue. And then I also invested along the way in this company called DSP Concepts was in the audio voice space, right? That allowed companies to easily develop an audio solution and also a voice. And they had no idea Alexa was going to hit them in the face. And when Alexa came and hit it with a storm, everybody wanted to put voice on everything. So I invested very early in this company. When I led what they call the seed round, which is very early on, the first $2 million worth of investments. I led that round, meaning I set the terms, and people behind me, I took everyone behind me and said, we all took the same terms, and I set the terms, and I invested in the company, and they all followed behind me. And so when I did that, I was able to get acquainted with this company, and about 2 years later, they called me and said, Tim, we're growing like crazy. I need a CFO. So I left Flight Guru to come join them as CFO, and that's where I am today. And in January, we raised about close to $18 million to go raise this company. So basically, we're taking the startup company and we're funding it, and we're basically growing like crazy. And we think we're gonna go and capture the world in terms of voice and audio. So that's kind of where we are. I know there was a lot of stuff in between there, and I wasn't able to sort of go through step by step on sort of my steps, but I want to leave it open for questions. I think that's where you'll get the most value out of this. So I think I've spoken enough. So let me end it here. By the way, I see Amanda Miller here. Amanda is an intern for us right now. She's in State College, but I hired Amanda as an intern, and she's been phenomenal. Just to let you know, she's a liberal arts major. She's starting her master's, I believe, in public policy in that sort of the world. But she came in and worked on our HR side, and she helped build what we call HRIS. So basically an HR information database. And she and our head of HR, just the two of them, put this entire thing together, and she worked over the summer. Phenomenal. She did an amazing job. Never did it before, but we brought her in to help do that, and we were just impressed. So I want to thank Amanda. She's on this call. She was amazing at this. So I know you liberal arts majors can do it. You just need a shot. And so let me leave it there, and leave you open for some questions. I know you guys have a lot of questions. I'm happy to answer them. And those are my kids out there in the back, pounding their feet, running around. So don't worry about that.
Well, everybody thinks of a question. Please go ahead and put it in the Q&A. Tim, I have one for you in the meantime. Sure. So, you really mentioned this commitment to learning and asking for help. And, I think, we're forever learning and adapting and obviously being flexible in our careers. But how do you look for someone having ownership or someone being committed? What are you looking for in a resume of an entry-level position, or someone like Amanda who was an intern coming in? What are you looking for them to demonstrate to you? What experiences, whether at undergrad or the like?
So one of the things I look for, and it's different for everybody, right? And a lot of it you find out through the interview, but this is the trick, right? This is the trick. Because a lot of people are looking for that specific ownership, right? Were you a paper boy, paper girl? Did you run your own business, right? If you can show something in there, because you don't have much in terms of professional experience. Maybe you have internship here and there if you're lucky, right? And in fact, if you're a sophomore, freshman, you got to go through and ask your dad or your mom or your uncle or your aunt or your grandma. They have to know somebody, right, in some company somewhere that can give you an internship, right? So you got to do the hard work and go out and do that. But when I look at it and I see a lot of it is going to be, listen, I studied a bunch of stuff. I went to Penn State University. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying this. I want to see in there something that you've done something with your life, right? Like you took ownership of something. I delivered papers in my neighborhood. I did it for whatever I was able to, get the job. I was able to deliver it. I was able to collect money, right? I washed the dishes. I was the nanny for the summer. Something that shows that you did something, right? And that something was something that you took ownership of. That you were able to get the job. You were able to do a good job. You were able to collect money, right? And hopefully they brought you back because you did a good job, right? And a lot of that in the interviews, I'll go through and I'll start walking through. And for me, everyone's different. I start asking you a lot of specifics. If you say, so I say, tell me the best about yourself. What are some things about yourself? Like, well, I'm gung-ho, I'm a go-getter. And I'll say, well, give me an example of how you're a go-getter. Can you give me a specific example? If you're very vague about it, I don't believe you. I want specific examples. So before you do an interview, think about if you say something, I want a specific example. It doesn't have to be big. It's like, when I was 7 or I was 10 and my mother asked me to do this, I do this, right? I'm organized. Why? You should see my closet. It is color coordinated from left to right. My socks up here, Those are real life examples. You don't have to say, I went and did an HRIS project. That's great if you did. If not, give me a specific example from your life. A real life example, because that's how they interview. Right?
I appreciate you sharing that. We're constantly telling our students, you have to have that breadth and depth and evidence of being an organized person, right? Especially even today. So we have a question that just came in from Amanda. How can students find out about opportunities in the tech space? And I'll add to that after you answer that part.
Sure. It's not easy. One thing I will tell you about Silicon Valley is it's pretty snobby, right? And originally when I came to Silicon Valley, I was also looking for a job as well, right? And I have a lot of experience, and I have an MBA, right, from a top 5 school. And it's really hard because I didn't have tech experience, you have finance experience. So a lot of folks here are like, well, if you never worked at a startup, how do you know, right? It's different than working at a Fortune 50 company, and that is true, by the way. And then how, because if you're also used to doing a 9-to-5 job that does this and this, at a startup, we're going to ask you to do this, right? And you're going to have to step outside and own something. And this is what I'm saying. You have to go outside and say, it may not be possible. We don't have anybody that does that. We'll go figure it out. Go on the internet. You have Google. Go figure it out, right? And that kind of mentality we're looking for. So how do you find a job? So one of the best ways I found out is LinkedIn, right? First of all, number one is ask your father, your mother, your uncle, your aunt, your friend's dad and mom. Ask everyone around you. You got to go and do the job, right? And you got to sort of be a hustler. And the number one thing I tell people, how do you work in tech? You got to be a hustler. What do you do when you're in tech? You got to be a hustler. You got to figure things out. I came in as CFO, but I'm hiring, I'm washing the dishes, I'm sweeping up. When a client, like a big company like Sony comes in, I clean the place up, right? Because it's my company, I own it, right? I'm a shareholder in this company. And everyone in my company gets stock options for a reason, because they own it. And I'm not gonna give it to you if I don't feel like you own it, right? So how do you do it? Number one, you go through all of the contexts that you have. Somebody has to know something, right? It doesn't have to be Silicon Valley, it can be New York, New Jersey. Everyone's trying to go online, right? So figure it out. So there's a guy with a website asking for an internship. So can I help you out, right? So getting the basic skill set of learning, if someone has a customer and they're paying them for something on the web, figure it out, right? You can put that down as on my resume as startup company, I did X. I took a list of his customers or potential customers and I put them on a list and I called them, right? Number two, get on LinkedIn, right? And try to figure out, are there Penn State grads out there in Silicon Valley or New York or New Jersey or Boston, anywhere, right? Look for Penn State grads, from high school folks, someone who went to your high school, sometimes it's on there, and then write them a very specific email on LinkedIn, right? And sometimes you guys may have to buy the premium version. I know it sucks and it's expensive, but there are student rates on it. You got to hustle. Go write them email, specific email, get their find out what company they work at, whatever it is, call their main line. Hey, John Smith works there. Could you find him on LinkedIn? Yeah, can I get John's number? His extension, his phone number? Like, go ask, right? You got to hustle to get that information. Then write him an email, give him a call, say, listen, I'd love to work and do an internship, and here's why. Don't just say, oh, I'd love to be there. Number one, find out who they are, find their contact information, contact them. Number two, be very specific in your ask, right? I'm looking for an internship to do X and Y, and this is what I can offer you, right? I can do X, right? This is what's, right? And this is what I offer you, right? So what is your need? And here's how I can fulfill your need. And if it is, I'll do an unpaid internship from my home. And a lot of folks, frankly, are looking for that, right? And even if you look at Mark Zuckerberg's at Facebook, the CEO of Facebook, he had a podcast out for his company, which we got access to. And basically said, I want 50% of my workforce to be remote. In the next 5 years, 50% of Facebook to be remote. Where are they right now? They're in San Mateo, they're in Menlo Park, they're in Palo Alto, they're in Pleasanton, they're in Santa Clara, they're in San Francisco. Where do you want them now? He wants them in State College, Pennsylvania. He wants them in Greenville, North Carolina. He wants them in Tallahassee, Florida. That's what, why? I looked up today, I'm making an offer to somebody. Detroit, Michigan, software engineer, mid-level, $100,000. Silicon Valley, same guy, undergrad, $150,000. There's a reason why people want to get out of Silicon Valley, right? And so what are most of you guys going to do? So number one, what can you offer them? Think about what you can offer them. Are you a good project manager? Are you organized, right? Think about it. What does a company need? We need people that are organized who can, so an intern. I need an intern basically at a startup to do a lot of different things, right? So there's several things. One is there's Amazon and the Googles of the world, right? Then there are these startups in the world that you got to figure out. And so number one is figure out some kind of a catch to get in. So I really like audio and voice. I'm a musician. I play the guitar, right? I would love to be inside your company. And you're like, wow, we're an audio company. We love somebody who is sort of, because it's like 60% of my company plays a musical instrument. Connect with me. Figure that stuff out. You got to hustle. You got to get your way and figure out what they want, right? Figure out if there's a connection between two, whether it's your school, whether it's a connection to a personal relationship, whether it's because I play the musical instrument and I know you guys are audio and I care about that. I am passionate about music, right? Or is it that it's about a company about writing and I love to write and they're about blogging. I blog on your site. So let me give you an example. There's a guy who's who's a managing director, head of investment banking, companies who take private companies public, right? Who's in the internet space. He's the top guy, makes millions of dollars taking people public. He drove an Uber car for a year to prove to Uber he cared about them. So what they did, they said, I want the guy who take me public who understands my business, because he drove my Uber car for a year. It took him a year investment to prove that that's you, because why isn't that Goldman Sachs? Why is it not UBS? Why isn't that Credit Suisse? The Morgan Stanley guy said, yeah, I can do the job, but I cared because I drove an Uber car for a year. And I have an 80 an hour week selling my M&A services to folks, but I care about you guys. So I drove an Uber car for a year. That's what we want to see.
Tim, what would you suggest to our liberal arts students would be the top technical skills they should maybe garner on the side or try and gather experience in while still at Penn State?
Right. I mean, I'm telling you right now, my 10-year-old, 30-year-old, and we're lucky because we're in the Bay Area and I see it every day, right? They're learning Python, right? I don't think he's going to go into programming, right? I don't think so. But he learned the basic of Python. Python's not that hard, right? He can figure it out. He's much better than I am. I can barely code, right? And I learned the basic stuff when I was in high school, right? When I was in college, I looked at a few things, but I couldn't code I could barely code, right? My son at 13 years old, been coding for 3 years. This is what the kids do here, right? Learn. You don't have to be an expert. Learn about it so you know what it's about, right? It's not that hard. Number one, if you want to work in tech, I would suggest you take the basics, whether it's a Penn State, whether it's Coursera, something, right? Because that tells me that you're interested. Even if you're not going to be on the programming side, you're on the HR side, it tells me you're interested, right? It tells me there's a commitment to it, right? There's a lot of stuff out there that are at LinkedIn courses, things like that. Because I don't need it from your classes already. Let's say you're a junior going in your senior year. You're not going to redo everything again and go back into computers comp sci or whatever, right? But take one like analytical class, right? Take one, because everybody wants something to say you're comfortable with numbers, right? Take a data analytics class. Take it on LinkedIn. Take it at Penn State. Take it at something else, right? Go online. Right? Figure out some way to prove to somebody I can be analytical. I know a little bit about it, right? So if you're interested in doing it, learn a little bit about programming. Now pick Python. Pick something, right? They're all pretty similar, right? And figure out what that's about.
We had 2 additional questions come in. So the first one is, do you have any advice for college students networking and seeking internships during the current times? I think your hustle is perfect for that. Also, do you have experience working with biotech companies? If so, could you expand on that?
So I have a good friend of mine. She's a general counsel at a biotech firm. And I actually invested personally. So I invested in a bunch of different companies. One of them was a medtech company, medical technology company, started by my brother, who's a professor down at Temple Med. So I have a little bit of experience. Biotech is a totally different beast. It's a totally different world, right? In terms of there are different venture capital firms that support that versus technology, right? So it is, but however, it is pretty prevalent out here in the Bay Area and up in Boston and down in San Diego, right? And so it's a different animal, but it's the same idea, right? Because when you develop the right biotech products, you can own an entire industry, much like tech. Your job in tech is to be a monopoly, right? To own something. And so biotech's very similar. If you want to get into biotech, I'm not an expert in that. I will say you probably, not knowing that much, I would say, number one, you got to hustle your way through to somebody. Have someone to open their ears and listen to your story, right? And so one of the things I've been doing as CFO and the head of HR is I'm looking for good interns online. I really am, right? And if I'm in the Bay Area and it costs me to get an entry-level guy or gal at $65,000, $70,000, I've learned over this period of time, I get somebody in Pennsylvania for a lot less, right? And so I would make that pitch, saying the world is going into this world of being distributed, right? And I can provide X. So if you're wanting to do biotech, I would just find interesting biotech companies, find out why, but do your research. Go online, figure out, there's so much information online. Find out what they do, and then focus in. That's an interesting area that I would be interested in, and research it, and approach somebody, LinkedIn friend them, write them a little email saying, I'm very interested in this area of X, right? And if you're very specific, like, oh my God, that's what we do. There's not a lot of people in the world that are interested in that, right? Connect with them. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it, is try to connect with them somehow.
That's a great segue into our next question. How has mentorship impacted your career?
Yeah, so I would say I didn't have a lot of mentors until I got to my first job. And I was lucky in the sense in my management development program, they gave me a very senior level executive as my mentor. And I learned what it means to be a mentee, right? And working with a mentor. And after that, I consistently sought out senior level people in my company or other places that I've run into and said, oh my gosh, they have so much that they could offer me in terms of knowledge, not only about the job or whatever, something that I want from them, but more about what makes them successful, what their skill sets like time management or so on, right? And so, but you have to provide something for that, right? What can I be helpful for? And a lot of times it's a personal relationship, like it's somebody connected to my family, right? Or it's somebody that through a professor that I helped in a research project who introduced me to somebody in the industry. Like you gotta hustle, right? This goes back to figure out a creative way. If you can figure out a way to get to somebody, there's a good chance you'll get something in terms of an internship or something, right? And so in that way, think about it as, so I purposely now look for people who I'm willing to mentor, but I gotta see something in them. Like, what is my connection with them? Is it a Penn State degree? Is it that they're very interested in something, or I met them at a networking event where I'm speaking, right? And they're the one that approaches me and says, hey, this is my very interesting story. And it connects with me, right? So I'm actually purposely always looking out for someone that I can help out because someone helped me out, right? So there are, frankly, a lot of people that are willing to be mentored. You just have to ask. And you have to sort of say, this is what I want out of the relationship. You got to know in your own mind, right? And then saying, how can I be helpful too, right? And sometimes it's as much as just as the person gets a lot of satisfaction from mentoring somebody who sort of are interested in asking good questions and researching, not just someone who sits there and says, oh, let's have coffee once in a while, but really come with this topic that you want to talk about, right? And because once you get that person, you got to, keep that relationship going. And that's, why are we having this relationship, right? Because I tell you, ask, because you'll be surprised. A lot of people want to mentor young people. But you got to develop that relationship. It's on you. Yeah.
So a little bit of a HR focused question for you.
Yep.
Do you have any advice on how to pursue human resource management in tech companies as opposed to other industries?
I'm sorry, what was the first part of that question? What about human resources in tech?
The students looking for any advice that you might have on pursuing HR within tech as opposed to other industries.
Sure. So in HR, it depends again, right? There's the large companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook, where there's a very structured HR program, right? And then there's a lot of startup companies in HR that are very different, because they're scaling, right? And so let me break through down what does HR look, and why is an analytical finance person doing HR, right? Let me walk you through that. And this is kind of a Silicon Valley sort of secret in the sense that no one really talks about it, but this is what we do. So how does Uber hire 1,000 people a month, right? How is that done? Could you ask GE to do that? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to hire 1,000 people, especially if you're in a specific niche. How do you do that, right? So let me first step back for a second and tell you what major functions of HR are. Number one is a life cycle from finding people, bringing them on the company, onboarding them, providing them benefits, providing where they fit in the organization, right? And then what the organization should look like, how to get them to perform, how do you track their performance, and then exiting them out the company, right? That's the life cycle of HR, right? Very simple. Bring in the company, how do you provide services for them, the benefits, how do you help them become better at what their job, how do you evaluate the performance and tell them where they need to get better? And then for folks that can't succeed in the company how do you get them out, right? That's the life cycle of HR, right? In terms of what I look at in a startup. And so with that in mind, if I'm hiring 1,000 people a month, how do I do that, right? So a lot of the focus is in startups, which are early stage, is on the recruiting, bringing people in the funnel. How do you find all these people? How do you interview these people and bring these people in and they're A players? Because if you're a startup and you don't have a bunch of A players, you're in trouble, right? You're a B company and you're never going to make it because that big company is going to eat you up, right? So the way you do it, and here's the secret, is you bring a lot of young people in to be what you call the folks that go out on the internet and find people, right? So what happens is the senior recruiter will say, I have a bunch of 2 or 3 people. So there's hundreds of these teams sometimes, right? Or at least 50 of these teams if you're growing that way. Well, you have a guy who's a sourcer. The sourcer goes on LinkedIn, and the senior recruiter is part of the team. So there's a sourcer or several sourcers. There's a recruiting manager and an admin. So what happens, sourcers find people, recruiters interview them, right, and set up interviews, and the admin sets up interviews, sets up all the scheduling stuff, and all of the packages and emails go out to the recruiter and also to the actual teams that are hiring them. And you have tons of these pods, right? And that's how you hire 1,000 people a month. Okay? So when you look at it and say, what do you want to be? One of the things that the HR, a person where I think there are opportunities for you guys is, first of all, you got to know what opportunities there are. Number one is they're looking for sourcers, right? And they're looking for admins, right? So when you go into a tech company, let's say, and you got to have some, to get your foot in a tech company, you have to have an angle, right? Again, go back to hustling. You got to have an angle. Say, I really like X. That's a passion of mine. And this company does X. And get it right and says, I'm a liberal arts major. I know that you raised money from XYZ venture fund. I know you've done this, and I would love to be a sourcer, and here's how I've done sales. And first of all, you have to understand what a sourcer is. And I would love to have an opportunity to interview with you. And sourcers are paid sometimes by the hour or by the head count. So then that's how you know. So it's a sales position. So a lot of young folks in Silicon Valley, when the market was all here and it wasn't distributed before COVID, became sourcers, right? They go out there and they're calling people on LinkedIn. They're getting people and they're calling, hey, interested, I have this job for a software engineer, and with these, and so you put it through, and then the recruiting manager looks at it, so you can be a sourcer. Or if you're not, that's not the job for you, be an admin person who basically then will schedule everything, understand what HRS or a recruiting system is, and learn how to use it, and get everyone organized, send emails back and forth, their travel schedule, their airline tickets when you can travel, their hotel rooms, schedule all that. And that's your step into HR. And once you do that, then you can become either a recruiter or become the other way into benefits, right? So that's your step in. So that's something that's tangible, real opportunities. Now, in a down market like right now, do they need sourcers as much? Probably not as much. But if you're a growing company that just raised a bunch of money, your investors expect you to spend it and hire people. And what do software companies have? They need people. So what you do is you go on the internet, or you go on Google, find out who raised money. Crunchbase, right? Look on Crunchbase. Find out people who raise money in the specific space you're interested in, right? And then you go and find out, go on their website and look for opportunities. Another place is event planning. A lot of folks at liberal arts, a lot of companies will do the marketing and event planning. So they'll go out and say, we'll go to CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Show. We'll go to all these things, and you'll man a booth, and you talk about your company, and you organize these things, organize the trips. That's another entry-level job for liberal arts. A lot of liberal arts guys go in that way. Another program I will tell you is this. If you're interested in accounting, lots of opportunities in accounting. They're what they call the CAP programs. A lot of universities have CAP programs where they'll take non-accounting majors will take about a 6 or 8 week course in accounting, in-depth accounting, and you come out and you're actually qualified to be an entry-level accountant, right? And there's also something called, I forgot what it's called, and I'll get you this information. There's a group not refinery. There's a group in San Francisco that basically, if you want to get into coding or being a product manager or being a product marketing person, they have actually a class where you go and you live in San Francisco and you go through the class, you got to pay for it. And then they basically help place you once you're done the course. And a lot of folks will actually, liberal arts majors will learn the basics of what it is to be a product manager in software or in internet, and you'll learn from that and you go. In fact, there was a gal from Penn State who was an architecture major who went through that, and now she's in the graphic design department, right? And she's doing marketing, right? For I think I think one of the large consumer internet companies. So, well, there's a will, there's a way. And again, there's not that many people out there. If you're interested, I'll give you my personal email. Why don't you call me or email me? I'm happy to sort of guide you based upon your resume. Happy to guide you, and who knows, I could hire you myself if I feel you're really good. So I'll leave that out open for you guys, and I'm happy to have conversations with you guys and to sort of guide you towards, but a lot of it is just you got to do your research, right? You got to do your research, and you got to figure out what you want.
So I have a couple questions left, but I think there's a great way to package all of them together, that Tim. So we have a student who was political science, who is now transitioning into LER, to labor employment relations, interested in tech, but and then I have another student that's asking if political science majors can enter the field, and obviously you're living proof on that one, right? So how would you suggest to students to market themselves best as liberal arts students who may have decided on a major, and as you're saying, it may be a little bit late to transition? What liberal arts skills should they be promoting in their resumes? How should they connect, obviously through the hustle, when others might turn their head if they're not the major they're looking for?
Right. I think one of the things is not really the major itself, but what are you learning out of that major, right? So I'm a good writer, right? So they think about a company. Well, what do they need? They need people they're product managers who talk about what the requirements of a product are. Marketing manager that basically tells the value proposition of why you should buy my product. They're salespeople who sell the product, right? So and then they're project managers who manage projects, right? But in tech, a lot of that, actually, frankly, you need some experience in the actual space itself. So you've noticed that at a very junior level, there are companies like Amazon and Google will get you into the entry level. They have these programs and they can do that. That's one way, right? But not many people get into that, right? It's very competitive. It's tough to get into it. And if you get into it, good luck. It's tough to get in. If you're talking about those things, I would say, number one, as I said before, take one class on programming, on coding, right? There's Code Academy. There's a lot of things. Show some interest in that, right? If you want to go tech, if you're software, at least figure some of that out, right? Number one. And so if you can say, I'm a political science major, I know how to write, I know how to communicate, right? And talk about what that means. I placed and I did, X number of speeches. I was a president of my class or of this activity group, right? I organized this. All of those things are important. I look at it and say, they have real life proof. They didn't just tell me, they gave me an example of how they're organized. And again, give specific examples of skill sets that you bring: organization, project management, of writing. I've done graphic design on my program. I'm a video editor in my time. I do a lot of things on Instagram. Whatever it is, write that down, because those are the skill sets, right? What do I care that you're political science or history? I want a skill set, right? So talk about that.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on, and it's wonderful to have you, Tim, and share your advice. And definitely, I'm excited for all of our students to hear your message, and I love the hustle, and I hope they're hearing that and living that. For all the students that are here today, again, this event was recorded, so you are going to be able to access that through our YouTube channel, through the College of Liberal Arts. And you're also able to reach out to, obviously, the Career Enrichment Network one-on-one. For those of you who had more deeper specific questions on your resume and transitioning from one major to the other, please schedule an appointment with any of us, and we can talk to you about just what Tim's saying is heightening that skill set and connecting yourself to that industry you're applying for. So that's what we're here for. So with that said, I think we've had a wonderful evening conversation with you, Tim. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
I hear you're going to be at the history panel in October. So we'll look forward to that as well.
No, I'm looking forward to it. And again, like I said, I'm willing to help out. So let me know if you guys need help or specifically want to look at your resume, whatever it is. I'm willing to help. So take me up on it. I may be your connection to Silicon Valley.
Tim, would you be comfortable? I'm going to email all the attendees for me to include your email at that point. Is that
No
okay?
problem.
Okay, awesome.
No problem.
I will do that then tonight. So
No problem. Okay.
All right. Well,
Good luck, guys.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.